March in Minnesota last year. So welcome, Nancy.
Check these chairs. Anybody read Roxane Gay's Hunger? Yes. Okay, so you know what I'm thinking about, right? Like she has this whole story in there about walking up some stairs and they kind of broke and then the chair broke. Big girls, we got issues. We got issues. All right, our tricky chair's good.
I tried. Those are regular chairs and they're
oh, these are good. This one is from a booty.
So, Nancy, I know I introduced you and kind of ran through some of the other organizations you've been involved with, but can you tell us a little bit about Clockwork, since that's right here in the neighborhood? And I know we'll be talking a little bit about what we do here.
Sure. It's funny because Clockwork is over on East Hennepin, so right across the Hennepin Bridge, if you just keep going into the neighborhood where you, by Chindian, and just keep going, just keep going. There's a yellow building, and people always say, oh my gosh, that's who that is. Because people drive by the yellow building and they think, what the hell do they do in there? Do they fix cars? What do they do? But we're a digital agency, so we build, we solve business problems with technology. We do digital strategy, digital business design, application development, solution development, and we have teams of designers and strategists and engineers, cloud consultants that deploy comprehensive solutions for our clients.
So that's what you guys do. But so there's a couple things I wanted to talk about Nancy with today. And one is kind of her perspectives as a business owner and leader in that field, some of the public advocacy she does, and then some of her personal stuff so that we can get a pretty broad sense. And so that's what Clockwork does. But what's it like to work there?
I don't know. What's it like to work there?
Hold on.
We're going to do it. It's amazing. I can't speak highly enough about Clockwork and Nancy and everyone who works there. It's fantastic. I go to work every day and I look forward to it.
So that's why I want to talk about this a little bit. It's not
right here.
You work with and how you guys work as a company. I see you so shaky, and so it's been at least I hope, a lot of companies to kind of improve that culture and that work environment, and I think Clockwork has been a great example. So
thank you. If you can share
a little bit about how you've and how you kind of built that up.
Sure. I am an accidental entrepreneur, and I think I became a business owner, a business leader, because I was unemployable. I couldn't work for other people. Other people are horrible. I don't know if you've noticed, but managers and leaders inside most organizations weren't ever really taught to be managers or leaders. And they believed that gave them some sort of authority over other humans, and they used that authority. And I was on the receiving end of that. Because I had a bit of a big mouth, I received it real well. So I really early in my career that I was going to struggle. I was day I had a really bad boss. He's still in business in town, and I say this a lot and hope that it gets like tweeted like crazy because he knows who he is. He was sort of he was a sexist white guy, right? We know them, we love them, because without them we'd be nothing. And thinking, I can't go to work again. I never, and I just didn't show up for work. And he called me, he was like, are you dead? It was like 3 days later, mind you. 3 days later he calls to ask if I'm dead, and I was like, as far as you're concerned, sir. I woke up thinking I'm never going back to work, and then I made a list of the kinds of work that I wanted to do and the kinds of companies I wanted to work for, the people. And it was part values, part sort of qualities that I wanted to find. Now this was 20 26 years ago, 25 years ago, and out of that list came my quest for what ultimately led me to my business partners, and we worked at Bitstream Underground, and now we work at Clockwork. And these were people who matched my values, who moved through the world telling the truth, who didn't put on airs, who didn't believe that they were somehow better than. I mean, just because you start a company doesn't make you better than the people you employ. In fact, if they don't show up, you're screwed. You know, I mean, listen, people, we have all the leverage in the world because organizations need us. They need quality talent. They need brains. And these guys just made sense to me. And so I remember when we started Clockwork, it was after we had sold the last company, and I literally made notes on a cocktail napkin at lunch, and the notes that I made were, here's the business model, which has shifted a little bit, and here's the values we want to live by, and here's the kind of work environment we want to create. And at the time, it was radical. Clockwork's been around for 16 years. It was radical. And I remember I had a mentor say to me, just because you have these radical ideas about culture doesn't mean that, people are going to listen until you have the numbers to prove the story. Nobody cares. Well, now I have those too, because, I think people can be a business strategy, because if humans are happy, they make other humans happy. And what are we calling that today? What are we calling that? CX, right? We're calling that customer experience. But I have a customer, and it's those people. And they have to feel valued every day in order for our customers to feel valued every day.
As kind of a heads up, which I should have done earlier.
Oh, God.
There will be some strong opinions shared here.
Oh.
There will be some big talk about values and beliefs, and Social Media Breakfast aligns with Nancy a lot from a personal and a professional level. So please keep an open mind throughout this, because we are going to also, if that doesn't happen to be your value, we respect that. But we also want this to turn into a learning opportunity as we talk through these things. And so, like I said, keep an open mind, and even if you disagree with some of it, see if there's a takeaway that, as general, might be something you can bring back to your business or your personal life.
Yeah. I mean, what's to disagree with so far, huh? What'd you hear that you don't like, huh? Tell me. I'm just kidding. Some of you were like, oh my God, she's hostile. Hostile big white lady. Terrifying.
So, speaking of that.
Yeah. Speaking of being a hostile large white lady.
Speaking of being a white lady, we're gonna go with that.
Okay.
I know increasing diversity in both industries in general and then in specific workplaces has been a challenge for some people. I know, as an organization, Social Media Breakfast, we've been trying to find ways that we can increase our diversity both in our speaker lineups and our audience. If you guys look around,
it's really working.
You might see people that you might see some groups that are underrepresented, even here. And one of the challenges we've seen on the speaker side is we tend to go with people we know, or we tend to ask for recommendations from people we know. And so we're not expanding that network. We're kind of, admittedly, sticking in our own circle. So how have you guys done that at Clockwork and made that work?
Well, I don't know if we can say we've made it work yet. I don't know anybody who gets to claim that. But I think that so for the first part of my career, I hid the fact that I was gay. And I did it not for myself, not because that's where I'm most comfortable. I did it for everybody else. I did it because I believed that I would make my clients more comfortable if they just didn't know. I didn't want them to, struggle. And I believed that, hi, Natasha. I believed that I was doing my business partners and my staff a service by hiding myself. And I think beyond that,
I mean, you know, I walk through the world like most privileged white people. It never occurred to me that there was work I had to do. I mean, it doesn't, we're stupid. We're stupid people. It never occurred to me that I had to do the work. And I was experiencing oppression that I was putting on myself. Now, I told you about my sexist white guy boss from a million years ago. His issue with me was I was a loudmouth lesbian. Do you know what I mean? I remember when he hired my replacement while I was still there, and she was a very attractive, young, blonde lady who showed up to work next to me without a word. It turns out he had intended to let me go, and I was essentially training my replacement, and she was the antithesis of me. And we ended up being friends. Like later on in life, she dated a friend of mine, and I knew her, and she was lovely, but he knew what to do with her. She made sense to him. I made no sense to him, and he did not know what to do with me, and he treated me that way every day of my life. So I knew what it felt like to be marginalized at work. I knew what it felt like to, you know, the stuff he said to me was so out of line and cruel, but it wasn't because I was attractive. And I always say this, we have, you know, there's this dialogue that we have when we're talking about sexual harassment, where we talk about what happens if your boss has an attraction to you. We don't talk about the cruelty that happens if he doesn't.
Or she doesn't. Or they doesn't.
Or they don't.
Thank you.
You know, we don't talk about what happens if the boss doesn't think you're attractive or approve of your identity. What happens then? And it's no fun on either side of that equation. So I had that experience, but I still didn't know we had to do the work. And that's sort of a long way of saying that we talk a lot about diversity, and for us, culturally, diversity is numbers. But people aren't numbers. And the bigger opportunity, I think, is to open up the conversation about inclusion and determine what it is about our workplaces that make people feel welcomed and included and be intentional about it. And hire people that are intentional in the energy that they bring to work every day and talk about it and make it part of the conversation every day. And I think that when we started the Minnesota Tech Diversity Pledge, we did it so that we could create the conversations because we wanted to sort of acknowledge that nobody knows what they're doing, especially HR. Like nobody inside of organizations, especially D&I officers inside of organizations.
I don't know what D&I officers are.
Oh, I'm sorry, diversity and inclusion officers. There are diversity and inclusion people inside of organizations, but they aren't making the organizations any more adept at embracing the talent that we need to succeed. And there's no safe spaces to ask the stupid questions. And there's no safe spaces to sort of just sit and be stupid, honestly. So we wanted to do that. So I think, I'm obviously rambling.
No. I'm going to cut you off, though, for just a second. You mentioned...
Dear God.
You mentioned the Minnesota Tech Diversity Pledge.
Yes.
So if you could take just a moment, in case you guys aren't familiar with it, to explain what that is.
Sure. So MinTech Diversity... the Minnesota Tech Diversity Pledge is at mintechdiversity.com. And it was a way for us to invite other technology companies, because there is a real issue in the technology space. And I have sort of grown up in tech and spent the majority of my career, certainly the first part of my career, is the only woman at the table all the time. And I was considered, this right here, diversity right here. And that I struggled with a little bit. But now that conversation, it has been amplified, the volume is up, but there hasn't been a ton of change. We're talking about it, but there hasn't been a ton of change. So there are diversity pledges that I had seen. I know that Portland has one, but so I wanted to launch one here for the technology industry and just encourage, I didn't want us to start policing each other, but I wanted us to sort of set a baseline for those conversations that I want organizations to start having, that cannot just be centralized in HR and cannot allow for the tokenizing of humans inside of organizations. Like, it is all of our responsibility to create inclusive environments. And so we created the pledge, we determined the criteria, we invited companies to sign on, we got a few early folks that signed on, and then we launched it. Super simple website. We have over 150 companies now, including Thomson Reuters and Jamf Software and some really great large companies, small companies, mid-sized organizations. We host these events at Clockwork, everything from how to build an inclusive brand to coming out as trans in the workplace to, and we get people from HR and diversity and inclusion offices, but we get people from all different parts of organizations asking tough questions, hearing really hard stories. Like, you know, I'm doing an HR conference in a couple of weeks, I'm speaking at it, and I always tell HR people a story that I heard at the trans panel, and that was there was a very distinguished, very accomplished PhD on that panel who said that the people who made it the hardest for her to transition at work were actually the HR professionals. And those are the people that were supposed to make her feel safe. Those are the people that made her really uncomfortable. And I say that, and just the other day I was having this conversation with some people, and I said, you know, we banty the LGBTQ acronym around because L and G are cool now. I don't know if you noticed, but we're cool. We're the rainbow. Got rainbow, right? Yeah, right. First, if you went to the right clubs. Sarah. But the truth is, we're still struggling with the Q and the T, and we won't say that out loud, but we're going to look at them funny and make their lives hell. And I like to tell people, you know, just because you don't understand a community doesn't mean they're going to go away. They're not going to go. We are living in a time that somehow we believe, well, you can not believe in trans people. Who gives a shit what you believe in? You know, it's like, go home and deal with yourself. But those people deserve respect and dignity because they're human. Because they're human, right? We all deserve respect and dignity. So that the Tech Diversity Pledge was about creating space for those conversations so we can get over ourselves. We can get over our fear of the other, because guess what? We are all the other. We all have something that others us, you know, whether it's my big fat ass. I mean, seriously, we all have something. So let's get over it. Let's create the space. Let's talk about it. And that's what we're trying to do. We are actually hiring somebody to help us manage, curate content for the Tech Diversity Pledge. We're going to create a newsletter. We're going to feature people that are doing it right. We're going to curate more events, and we're going to make that into something, because it really has sort of taken off and taken on a life of its own.
Are there plans to use some social media behind that?
Why, yes. Wouldn't it be funny?
I'm going to sneak in some like social media specific questions, since this is Social Media Breakfast. But I think there's, even if we're not talking about social media specifically, when something like this impacts the way we work, it's important to learn from, because it might continue to other pieces. Especially a bunch of us are marketers, and our job is to talk to people. Mm-hmm. We should make sure we talk to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I don't see, like, if I'm talking about the pledge, it was entirely presented to the world on social. So I don't see a separation between the stories that I tell and what shows up in social spaces, because without social, there would be no pledge. Without social, there would be no events. We don't do a ton, I don't do any marketing, especially, I mean, Clockwork does very little marketing. The way we market is we sponsor events. That's all, and we sponsor events that align with our values. We don't, if there's an ad someplace, you can bet that it came with a sponsorship, because we do not buy ad space. We sponsor, you know, kids in coding, we sponsor women in coding, we sponsor all sorts of events, but we do not market. So social is how we tell the stories that matter most to us.
You mentioned that kind of HR and recruiters are the ones who get it wrong. And one of the specific things I've noticed coming up more and more is how to write job descriptions that both focus on skills, but also invite not just diversity of background, genders, cultures, but diversity of thinking. Mm-hmm. And so is there anything you can share that might help people improve that? Or maybe it's just a struggle for everybody that we're going through.
I think it is a struggle for everybody. I don't know that I have the secret about job descriptions. I think that where we make some inroads is in the communities that we try to reach out to or show up for. So I mentioned the sponsorships. When we are you know, actively engaged with Coder Dojo, or when we're actively engaged with, you know, the Hack the Gap or whatever, you know, that engagement happens on social, but we ask for what we need. So we reach out to those communities and we ask them to share opportunities that exist at Clockwork, so that we are really trying to get the jobs connected in the communities that we would love to see show up. We have actually fostered some really interesting relationships with, you know, folks that do that have programmatic relationships with schools on the north side, or you know, schools that exist in communities outside of this market, and the primary reason for that is, you know, we most of us are advertising our jobs in spaces where, you know, diverse talent has not historically been invited. And so, and again, we're stupid, so we have to ask the questions about where those communities show up and where best to have our content show up with them.
Before we, not before, I just want to know, what are some of the big, I don't want to call them mistakes, but some of the big blunders companies are making, or maybe misguided thoughts on things, like, you know, inviting somebody of color to be on a panel because you noticed there were too homogenous, I can't say that word. You guys know what I'm trying to say, right? Too many similar people on the panel, or, you know, kind of as a token way to do it. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, just donating to something, it isn't enough. So where are you seeing some companies still kind of struggling with getting beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, I think tokenizing people is just it's an age-old horrible habit. I can't count the number of times that somebody's called me as an afterthought because they need to have a female on a panel or at an event, or they need, you know, and how many women in business, you know, if you're a woman in business, you have been called because, oh my God, look at that, we don't have any women. Look at that. We miss them. So I think it happens far too often, and I think, honestly, I think we need a consciousness shift. We need a cultural consciousness shift to understand that the value of an event, or, you know, the value of a conversation, I think it has to be thoughtfully planned in order for it to be valuable. And we have to, and, you know, perspective is an amazing thing. And when you plan something from your perspective, you're delivering a narrow view of a story. And I think we just have to be more thoughtful and planful in how we approach events and opportunities for conversations like this. I don't think there's a secret. I think it's admitting that we're doing it wrong and experimenting and experimenting and experimenting until we land on content that resonates with broader communities. And that's just reality. And you gotta do the work and you gotta be uncomfortable. And in order for you to create an event that you've never seen before, you have to go to events that you can't, do you know what I mean? Like you have to go to events that you've never seen before. In order for us to have, you know, more diverse, more culturally diverse audiences and participants, we have to go to more culturally diverse events and organizations. We have to put ourselves in the position, and let's face it, most white people don't like how that feels. We don't like that feeling. But that is how most people of color, I imagine, feel in Minnesota. You know, I mean, so it's our job to do the work.
Well, and I like the way you say we don't imagine, or we imagine that that's how they feel too, because we can't know. No. I know I was surprised once, and I shouldn't have been. Somebody who was in a lower income bracket, they super talented, wanted to share that talent with a new, looking for a new position and role where they could, you know, kind of do good work. And they mentioned that trying to get to interviews was difficult because taking time off meant losing pay, and the travel time because they were going to take the bus, or just, you know, couldn't afford extended daycare. And so that had a big impact. I've never experienced that, and it hadn't even occurred to me to think that through. And there's a simple solution. You could do a video chat or a phone call to invite that. And I'm wondering, have you seen or just experienced other kind of like, oh, that is simpler than I thought?
I mean, we've done a ton of video interviews as of late for that very reason. We want to show up where people are versus expecting them to show up where we are. And I think technology has been a real gift in terms of opening up opportunity for more folks.
With some of the organizations you've been involved in as a business and as sponsoring them, are you seeing more people or organization leaders approach you, or are you guys mixing that with actively going out and finding those and kind of developing your criteria for who you'll sponsor or not sponsor? Because I know, like, a lot of us might want to do sponsorships to get in front of a group or to be able to connect with them and get them as advocates, maybe even influencer relationships. But we don't have enough budget to sponsor everybody or all the things or all the places.
I mean, I feel the same way. I'm still a small business. And at this point, we don't have to do a lot of active searching because, it kind of blows my mind how often people come to us. But because of that, we get to meet organizations and humans we never would have had a chance to meet. And I think it's because the word on the street is, go to Clockwork. Go to Clockwork, they'll sponsor anything. I'm just kidding. But I think what people know is if your story is interesting and you're doing the work, like at Clockwork we create technology solutions. I don't have time to put saving the world in our mission statement too. So what can we do that feels good? And I don't mean that in a self-satisfactory sort of way. I mean that in a, what can we do that aligns with our values that moves the needle just a little bit? What can we do? Who can we support? Do you guys know who Sarah Moe is? She runs that sleep company. She just did a panel for Minnesota Business. She told me the other day, I ran into her, so Clockwork did a program through COCO where we provided seed money for the start of her entrepreneurial dream. So when her sleep company was very first started, she put an application in at COCO thinking nobody would ever touch this. It's the weirdest thing ever. Who is ever going to believe that talking about the value of sleep health in the workplace would be valuable to an employer? But when we read the application, and I had very little to do with it, honestly, when we read her application along with a series of applications, it was like, oh my God, yes, like sleep. The quality of your sleep actually contributes to the quality of your work. This woman makes so much sense. And it turns out she's a woman of color, but the way she tells the story, you would have thought that we plucked her from obscurity and gave her this opportunity. The way we tell the story is, we created this great relationship with this person who taught us. I mean, my business partner had a sleep study and now sends her love notes because she changed his life. And you can't say anything to her. Like, if you tell her you snore, you're getting a sleep study. Just be clear, you have apnea, like you need whatever those things are, what is that called, CPAP? Is that what it's called? CPAP. How many of you have CPAPs? Tell me. See, you probably all need one.
If you guys are shy about saying that, I'll say Michael used to have one. That was probably TMI.
Come on. But so for us, it was us providing this little seed opportunity for an idea that mattered. For her, it was, I went to Birch Steakhouse last week, ran into her there, and she started to cry. Sorry, Sarah Mo. Because for her, it was validating an idea and telling her her business mattered. And that was just a thing that Don Ball asked us to do one day. So you know, like, you can have an impact without even trying by showing up for other people's ideas and other people's businesses. And that's what we try to do.
Saving the world is, you said that a moment ago, it is an interesting concept. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it's also saving us from ourselves. So if we can switch gears just a little bit.
Okay.
You are, I mentioned earlier, chair and board member and advocate for like a zillion different organizations. How did that come about? How do you have that kind of time?
Well, so my biggest issue is family equality. I'm the chair emeritus for Family Equality Council, which is a national organization that creates policy, programming, and does advocacy for LGBTQ families all over the country. So we do things at the federal and the state level to ensure equality for all families, because I think we all believe, straight people believe, that marriage solves everything.
That's not true.
Right. And it doesn't. And it for sure didn't for queer people. So a lot of the things that, you know, everybody breathed a sigh of relief when the Supreme Court decided that marriage was cool between same-gender humans. But in the South, people are still afraid to get married. And the largest population of LGBTQ families exists in the state of Mississippi, where families were formed through straight relationships that probably weren't, straight relationships, that probably weren't real, and they can't get married out of fear of what their community would think. So what we try to do is create laws and policies that protect those families regardless of their marital status. I think the other thing that I'm really proud of that we did with family equality is we submitted the amicus brief that Justice Kennedy quoted in his swing ruling, in the Supreme Court ruling.
You just said another word I don't know.
A brief.
the word before brief.
The amicus brief?
Yeah.
It's like a brief of the people, right? Are there any lawyers in here? I mean, basically, there's the case brief, and then there's supporting documentation. We submitted some supporting documentation in actually 18 Supreme Court cases across the states, and then the national Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States, we submitted that amicus brief. And when Kennedy said, we cannot value one family's children, or we cannot value one child's family more than another's, and then voted in favor of same-gender marriage, it was that brief that he cited. So it was cool as hell. It's a really unsexy work. Like, the stuff that we do is we change forms. People all over the country are taking pictures of forms in schools because my partner and I have a son, and I can't tell you how often we fill out forms that say father and mother. And I am dad. I just need you to know that. Let's be real clear about roles. And those forms don't take into account how different families are. And it's not gay people that did it. Families have looked like all sorts of things forever. And I also think employers want to define families. You know, how your insurance construct exists at work defines or validates your family. And families, you know, siblings can raise their sibling's child. I mean, there's all sorts of, grandparents are raising children, aunts, uncles, friends. You know, it's not just gay people, but gay people need those legal realities wrapped up. And the reason I got involved in it is because it took me 9 years to get to my son. I was old when I finally got a kid. And my partner was real old. And don't tell her I said that. We wanted children, and we tried all the ways, and the stuff we were up against was super crazy. Like, I remember going to a very a very reputable agency here in the Twin Cities, and they were talking to all the adoptive families. You know, it was these glowing, smiley discussions with all these adopting couples, and then they got to the lesbians, and the woman said to me, "We will not collude with you to get you a child." So, sparkly, happy, awesome, and then, "I'm not gonna steal a baby for you, homo." That's how it felt. And I was like, and this was supposed to be an accepting, open adoption agency. And I gotta tell you, my life is deviant. I am such a huge deviant. Last night,
I'm really not sure what face to make in response to
that. Super deviant. Like, my partner makes hot dish, and this morning I didn't shovel when I left, right? I just drove over that snow. I just drove over it. I don't know who the hell I think I am. And let's see, what else? What else makes us so... I go to bed sometimes at 10:30. My spouse goes to bed at 9.
You take your son to the park?
Oh my God, do I ever. I'm an asshole. That's what I am. So I can see why we were a problem. And then... And then we went to international adoption, and we accepted two babies that both fell out of the system, just disappeared with no explanation. And then we were on a wait list with an agency in Chicago for 18 months, and it just was awful. And it was because 2 qualified humans wanted to make a family. So when we finally got our son, we decided we didn't want kids. I was like, well, forget it. They're probably not worth it anyway. Nobody seems happy or rested. That's what it was like, well, forget it. And when we decided to abandon our desires, there was a woman and this is an early social story, so you'll appreciate this. We'll get some social in there. There was a woman in the Twin Cities. We decided, okay, you know, we want to move. We're in limbo. It's emotional. Let's not do this anymore. We can be fine. We can babysit our nieces and nephews like other good lesbians and just, you know, do that. And there was a woman who had twin babies, and she threw them into the Mississippi River. Do you remember this, Jen? Yeah. and it was after we had decided no, and I remember it just hitting me so hard. Even today I think about that. And I went home and I wrote a letter, and I put it on the internet, and I said, pick me. Just pick me. Like, we got this. We can do this. You don't have to throw a baby away. Pick me. And I got letters, I got emails from people all over the country who said, this is what you can do, or this person has a baby, I'll get it for you. like crazy like notes from people all over the country who were like, there's this woman who aggregates crisis situations and a mailing list, and do you want my sleeve? And
I was going to grab it for you.
Oh, no, I'm okay.
Okay.
And you know, talked to this person, try and connected us with some other adoption coordinator. I mean, it was just like all of a sudden this, and my partner was like, Laura was like, what did you do? Like, we were done. And I'm like, I don't know. All of a sudden, like, babies are everywhere, and they want to give them to gay people. And so somewhere in that process, I got connected with a woman in Portland who I'm still friends with, who had a daughter, and she told us about what she did, and she connected with somebody on the internet who had this mailing list where she only talked to people in crisis situations all over the country. And the deal was, if she found you a baby that ended up being your baby, you paid her, which was kind of weird, but whatever. So I subscribed to that. Well, you have no idea what children go through in this country to be adopted. And let's be clear, this family equality thing is important to me because there are 400,000 children in the foster care system, and many of them cannot be adopted by qualified gay people because we're so deviant with our hot dish. It's like, if we aren't speaking up often, the foster care system is so broken, we are destroying children. We are literally destroying children and doing nothing about it unless you're Amelia Frankmeyer, who's here in town, and she is doing stuff about it. But we, as a culture, are not looking closely enough at what we can change. So I subscribed to this thing. We would get these horror stories of what these babies were going through. Crack babies, parents in prison who murdered each other, all sorts of stuff. And there was one in there, and I was like, maybe we'll have a conversation about that one. But the parent situation scares me a little. So I had this call with a random adoption coordinator in Iowa, and it didn't go anywhere. And 3 months later, we had moved on with our lives. It was over. My weird letter on the internet was over. And I'm walking into work one day, and I get a call, and this woman says, Nancy, you may not remember me, but you and I talked several months ago, and I have a woman in Texas who's going to have a baby, and she wants a same-gender couple, and we don't have any. I can't believe I'm crying about this. The kid's 11, and he's a pain in the ass. He came to an event that I did last night. I was in this fashion show for Planned Parenthood last night, and he hated it. And he just sat there the whole time like this. And he kept going, but why do they want you to do it? Beforehand, he just kept going, why are you gonna model, Mom? I was like, shut up. Shut up, come to this thing, shake hands, be charming, or I will kill you. So I got my wish, but...
not the killing part.
This woman wanted a same-gender couple because her sister had her best friends who were gay men who tried to adopt in Texas and couldn't. And they had moved through their process, and when her sister got pregnant and couldn't keep her baby, she convinced her that somewhere out there there was a gay couple that needed a kid. And there were 2 other straight families that they interviewed, and in our interview, it was on the phone, I made a really stupid joke, and my partner kicked me hard. Was like, what are you thinking? And they said, okay, we'll talk to you in the next 2 or 3 days. And 10 minutes later, our phone rang, and they said, oh, we think you're funny. and the kid might have fun with you. And I was like, I can't guarantee much, but that I can guarantee. And so she picked us, and I always tell people, like, we had to wait a really excruciatingly long time, but that's the boy we were waiting for. But if it wasn't for the internet, I would not have my son. If it wasn't for social media, I would not have my boy. And he's awesome. I can't believe I'm crying. I must be PMSing. Let's talk about that.
I think I'm going to go with social specifically, not just the internet, because the internet has a whole bunch of trolls.
Right.
And they're on social, but sometimes there's a name attached, and it's easier to block them and filter it out. So I've seen some of the conversations shifting.
Yeah.
And I mean, it helps that I also know how to unfollow or unfriend people that have viewpoints that differ from things that I think are important. Mm-hmm. And so as that has changed, has it affected what you share personally, and also how much traction some of the initiatives of the Family Equality Council have been spread wider than, you know, kind of an immediate network?
Mm-hmm. So, a couple of things. One is, I don't try to change anybody's mind on social. I'm not going to argue with anybody. The only thing I try to do is show pictures or tell stories. That's pictures, video, whatever. Tell stories that are true. Because, you know, going back to deviance, my family, my kid likes to snowboard, and we're carting him around to sporting events, and, you know, my spouse is awesome at parenting. Really, seriously, thank God. But seriously, like that, like, my spouse is the most engaged mom on the planet. And those are the stories that change people's hearts and minds. Me yelling and trying to convince them, you know, it's the little mediocre things that we have in common that make humans human, right? And that's the stuff that changes minds. So interestingly enough, as controversial as I may get online, I very rarely get any shit from people. And I think it's because I won't argue with you. And if you're just blatantly cruel, I will block you. I don't care. But if you want to engage in real discourse, if you want to ask real questions, I am happy to engage in that kind of a conversation. I think that Family Equality as an organization gets fine traction, but where we see real movement is when those of us who are involved with the organization tell real stories about our real lives. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's just like Justice Kennedy, right? We cannot ignore the fact that there are children in this discussion, and they need families, and they need their families to matter. So it's about family formation, but it's also about family validation. And what I find fascinating is that we live in a culture that really does feel like it can value some families more than others, and that it's simply not true. And when you see them, and when you hear from them, it doesn't matter how stone cold your heart is, you have to recognize that they matter too. And I think that's where social has been a real gift, because, you know, I don't love Facebook anymore. I don't know how many of you feel that. Like, I don't love Facebook because of because it's very difficult. It puts everything in your face. But I love Facebook for its storytelling opportunity. I very rarely post blatantly political stuff because I'm not going to engage in that with anyone. But I post stuff that is centered around sort of basic human values and decency. Because I believe that we just aren't hearing each other right now. Like, that's really what's happening. We just don't know how to reach each other. But I also believe that people are inherently decent. They want to be good. They want to be good. I even believe that the crazy Trumpers, and if you're in here, God bless you, I even believe that the people who are fanatically for Trump, almost to an extreme, believe that they're doing the right thing. I believe that's true. I don't get it, but I believe they want to be doing the right thing. We just aren't hearing each other. And I do believe that right now we are fighting a class war in this country, and we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to fight it, and fighting never solves anything.
One of the things I've been really encouraged by, and I've been trying to do myself, is just hear people speak up and say what their values are on social, or when they're sharing whether it's who they're voting for president or a new bill or something, and they're actually just vocalizing that they support it. And I think that sometimes that opens up conversations. And I know you mentioned you don't post political or what you just said, and engage in arguments, but when you see that stuff shared, do you think that that's a good opportunity to try to find ways to have a dialogue about it, or kind of some techniques we can use?
Sure. I mean, there is nothing that's totally black and white, right? I'm a business owner. If you think the democratic tax system is my friend, you're nuts, right? Like, if all I cared about was money, I would be a Republican, sort of. And listen, I'm not here to talk politics with any of you, or I want to be really clear about my political leanings. They are what they are, and I'm open about them. They are what they are because they have to be. I don't have a choice. And I find it fascinating that the political party that wants less government also wants to crawl into my bedroom and decide if I matter. Also, there is straight up nothing happening in my bedroom. You know, or any of yours, let's be honest. Are you married? You're done. You're done. That's why people get divorced, so they can have bedroom fun again. Let's be honest with each other. We don't talk enough about these things. So you're like, dear God, where's this gone?
I'm concerned. If you guys don't know, Michael and I are getting married in April, and so I'm like, I don't want to look over there when you say things like,
seriously. Well, I mean, listen, we could go down so many roads here, but you also hear about the people who have been married for 30 years, and they are it's just heaven in the Tempur-Pedic. But then they get divorced because they actually didn't talk. So, I mean, you know, everybody's got their issues.
I was going to say, they haven't done the sleep study.
Right. Also, she will tell you that 13% of couples admit to not sleeping in the same room, which I found fascinating. But so many people don't want to. The only reason we do is because we're afraid of how other people will perceive our relationships. I got a Murphy bed, people. It is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'll be up in a minute. I pull my bed out of the wall, go to sleep. Oh, look I fell asleep here. A proud Murphy bed owner. Should get one too. All right, what were we talking about?
We were talking about how conversations are shifting. I was going to say, but we've got so much more work to do for all different issues, whether it's, you know, you want a greener environment, or you want to share scientific information that's, you know, talks about climate change. Where do you see things going as social networks evolve and as people feel more comfortable sharing or start understanding different impacts and how it impacts their own life?
So I think that we are seeing the power to organize without organizations. And that's what happened with the Women's March, right? Like, how many, I mean, I know for Minnesota, we had 100,000 people show up because a group of women that didn't know each other prior to this got together and said, we want to do what they're doing and we want to do it here. And we thought 30,000 people would show up, and it was 100,000. And it was a wildly emotional day. But here's the thing. We cannot just have conversations online. And too many of us rely on our social voices, our social media voices, as activism, and that is not activism. That's yelling at a wall. It's one thing to promote the idea and the activity, but you gotta show up for the activity. And that's why that march was so powerful, but since then all we've been doing is talking about the march. So for me, like, as much as it appears that I'm on, you know, dozens of boards, I'm on NPR because that's a cultural institution that we need, right? And it needs to evolve, and I want to be a part of that evolution. Done. And it tells stories that I believe in, so content is, you know, a really real big deal. I'm on the Family Equality Board, but that is an organization through which I find my reason to activate. And I think we are bad at being active. I think that, since the 60s or 70s, we haven't had a reason to show up for much, right? And there are big reasons right now. So you got to pick your thing. For me, it's equality. Very specifically family equality, but I'm a feminist. It's human equality. We have to stop othering.
I did not read your shirt.
That's spelled wrong. Yes, it is. And so I think it's fine to organize people, to activate people online, but what we have to do now is show up. And we have to show up in physical spaces, we have to do the work, we have to reach out to people that we wouldn't normally reach out to, and then tell those stories. Because what was more powerful than organizing the Women's March? Seeing what happened. Right? Seeing what happened. We still refer to those pictures because we can't believe that many people showed up for something. Right? Why? Because we're selfish. We're selfish. And honestly, if you're straight and you're white in America, you don't have to care. Nothing about your existence is threatened right now. But if we don't care, we are in big-ass trouble. Truly, I don't care what it's not about political parties. It's about what's happening to us. The degradation of humanity is happening right before our eyes and we aren't showing up for it. And we have to.
We see it in other areas too. How many folks here, and I'm going to ask everybody, work in a workplace that's predominantly male?
Burn them down.
So my follow-up question is, have you shared that with anybody, that that's an observation that you've made? Have you shared that that's something that's important to you? We see talks about pay differences and gender inequality or class inequality in the workplace and in other areas of our lives. And I think sometimes social is kind of a safe space in a way where we can share those thoughts, but then they don't get back to the people who currently have the power to affect change. I know for me, when there's an issue, I write my senator, I write my House person, but I've worked at Modern Tribe for 2.5 years. I love them. I have never been happier to work for a company. And right now, one of our really important company initiatives is around diversity and inclusion. And not that we weren't a diverse and inclusive company before, but how do we maintain that? And how do we foster that as part of the company culture and across a workplace? We're a totally remote distributed team. And so communicating that out can be difficult at times. And what I'm going to ask is, as both a business owner and a leader on different boards, how can people start raising those questions more and getting it past just their personal, safe Facebook space into the hands of people who really need that feedback, who really need those perspectives?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. I think, that sounded like Oprah. I'm really glad you asked that question.
I always thought it was buying time to think about the answer.
That's what I thought too. I was like, oh, excellent question. I think it's a really great question because social is easy for us because of the distance between us and other people. So it's easy for us to say things on Facebook because nobody's in the room with us when we say stuff. And that distance, or in some cases anonymity, gives us permission to say things that we might not in public, right? Or at work or in our churches. And the message that I've been bringing to a lot of events that I've been doing lately is we need to stop behaving. It's why the march was so interesting, right? People weren't, they behaved. There wasn't trouble, but they did things you're not supposed to do. They said things that were in your face. They gathered in great numbers. They wore hats that might have offended people at another time, right? Like, they showed up in these spaces and they weren't worried about conforming socially. They weren't worried about behaving. And we are living in this really interesting time. I think especially in the workplace, there is a mode of behavior that is acceptable. And there is a way that you carry, it's why I'm so weird, right? Like, I'm weird because I say it. That's it. And I've always been this weirdo. In the last 10 years, last 5 years, people are paying me to be this weirdo. You know, I mean, seriously. But I have always been a weirdo who has said the stuff that everybody wished that they would have said. That has always been how I show up in the world. That is not something I'm always proud of, it's just my reality. We need more people brave enough to point to the shit that is horribly broken, to point to mistreatment, to point to intolerance, to point to inequities. We need to point to it and say it out loud. And hopefully you're white, and you can, right? We need to take some risks. Seriously, we need to take some risks. We need to show up for our communities. Get that, will ya? We need to show up for the communities that need us to show up. And we need to stop worrying about behaving. If your workplace is all male and you haven't said it, you need to go back and say it today. I mean, they know, number one. But you know what I mean? Like, and here's the other thing. It is super easy to point to what's broken. We live in a society full of, clockworkers hear me say this all the time. This is my peeve. We have horrible coffee. You know, it's like we point to the, I wish people would. Yep, everything is fucking broken. Now that we've set a baseline, can we please talk about what the solution is? We are all broken. All workplaces are broken, even mine. These guys will tell you, we have our share of dysfunction. I mean, awesome isn't awesome when you're in awesome all the time. You can find the broken in awesome, right? And God knows they do. Amber. Seriously, it doesn't matter how hard you work on a great workplace. There are things that are broken there. You are of no value to me as a business owner, to your business, to your companies, to your communities. You're no value at home if all you do is say, that refrigerator is broken. It's a broken refrigerator. Look at that broken refrigerator. You're a dick because you make me live with a broken refrigerator. What am I doing? Nothing. Nothing. You are valuable if you either figure out how to fix the refrigerator or find somebody who can fix it. Like, it is so easy to point to what's broken. And we are all good at that because humans default to the negative, right? What do we say to people? How do you feel today? I feel okay. Oh, my hip hurts. My husband is a jackass. Seriously, my car, I don't know what the deal is with my car, right? Those are the conversations you have every day at work. How are you? I wish it wouldn't snow. I hate the cold. Why do we do that? Because if somebody said to you, oh my God, I'm having the best day ever, you'd think, what the hell is wrong with you? We like negativity. We feed on it. We're weird. We like it. Get rid of it. Don't just point to what's broken. Fix it. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And show up for shit, for the love of God. But pick a thing. Just pick one thing. Write to those legislators. Show up at the Capitol. You know, gather your church communities. Put the stories online. Take lots of pictures. But don't just rely on social spaces to get your point across. Rely on physical spaces for it to matter and last.
Before...
Yeah! Next, we're going to talk about Jesus.
That's a hard no. Before we open up questions, I've got one more piece that I really wanted your take on, Nancy, which is something as marketers and social people, especially when we're doing advertising to promote our content or whatever else we're trying to do on social to get paid and seen, is how many people do targeting, right? And we're, as our day-to-day, we're looking at people as different segments. We are intentionally separating some from others, and we're doing it in the name of effectiveness and conversions and click-through rates. And so when that's our job, how do we look at that differently to make sure that it isn't what we take home at the end of the day?
Is it a science? Is it absolute? Are you sure? Exactly. Because you can't segment people effectively and know that you know what you're doing. I mean, I think people are not categories, they're complicated. And I think we understand what motivates behavior sort of online. We're lying to each other if we say that we understand it absolutely. And I mean, tell your clients whatever you want. You know, I mean, they want to hear that we are sure, but we aren't. And you know it as well as I know it. And, you know, data tells stories, and over time, we can see what tactics work, what techniques work, but it doesn't make us understand people any better. And I think when we sort of embrace the fact that people are messy and complicated and interesting and diverse, you know, I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't. I got out of the, you know, we don't really do any marketing at Clockwork because of that. Because people are messy and complicated. And there are no absolutes, and clients want absolutes, and you'd have to lie to them to offer them up. And I can't lie like that. So I guess marketing is not existing in the world. It's just marketing. You know, I mean, when you're marketing, you have a strategy, and yeah, I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't. I'm sorry. Thanks for helping me, you know, end on a high note. Thanks, Jen Jamar. I'm just kidding. I love you.
I told you how much I look up to Nancy. That hurts. So to end on a positive note.
Oh, okay.
I want to know, I hope this is a positive note, I want to know your favorite social network and what you post there.
Oh, Lord. I don't think I have, Twitter probably. It's probably still Twitter. It's probably still Twitter because so on Facebook, I sort of feel like I have to be a grown-up. And how many of you use Snapchat as your like middle-aged lady drinking game? Am I alone? Like, whenever I am with, like, my middle-aged lady friends, after 3 glasses of wine, we're like, let's get on the Snapchat. Let's get on the Snapchat and filter the shit out of ourselves. And we will just giggle hysterically, and we won't open it again for 3 weeks. And then I do, and then, like, I've got messages from people who are like, I just found you. I'm like, I'm so sorry. So sorry about that. Seriously, whenever I hook up with my old high school friends, it's like, oh, Snapchat. Oh, God. I don't know that I have one. I think Twitter gives me permission to say absolutely anything I want. I am now past the point of, like, I have to be a professional on the Twitter. Now I can be political, I can be funny, I can be human, I can be a little obnoxious, and find some amount of engagement on Twitter. I think Insta's interesting. I don't think we know what the hell we're doing right now. It's gotten so weird, right, and fragmented. Nobody knows what's really working. Well, Snap is the millennials, right? The millennials. No, because last night I was at that fashion show, and there were a whole bunch of young women talking about how they gave up Snap because they just had to give up something. I was like, you couldn't give up those cigarettes. You had to give up the Snap. So I don't think we have a handle on what's actually reaching people. I mean, Snap, it's doing this, right? Like, it doesn't know what it is either. I think Facebook is interesting, but we can't trust it. I think Twitter is interesting, but we don't know, we don't understand our engagement. I think Instagram is interesting, but it's candy. I think Snap is interesting, but you have to be drunk.
I feel like that's a much better note to end on.
Yeah.
All right, so if it's cool with you, Nancy, I'd like to open it up for questions.
I'm coming.
You have the mic.
Microphone.
Thank you.
It is cool with me.
Thank you for your insight, first of all. I appreciate it. I'm hearing 2 themes that seem to be polar opposites, and I'm wondering how you reconcile them.
Me too.
Okay. On the one side is diversity and inclusion, and on the other side is protecting our values and unblocking and unfriending and getting rid of people if they don't agree with us or don't support our values. How do you reconcile the tension between those two?
Well, I think what I said was I block people that are shitty to me, which is very different than people who have opposing views. And I feel really strongly about connecting with people whose opinion I don't share. So especially on social, I try really deliberately to listen to those conversations that don't include me. Because if I'm going to disagree with it, I have to understand what I'm disagreeing with, right? So I have really tried to improve my listening skills in real life and online. So I don't think that so far, but if we're not civil to each other, I'm not going to sit there and play. So I don't think it's opposing views as much as it's, I have boundaries, and I'm not going to engage in the horror that is happening online, quite honestly. I won't engage in that. I'm not going to stoop. I have better things to do with my time, and more respect for humans than that. So, does that answer the question? Okay.
First of all, just a comment that your point about you have to do something, you can't just be social and expect stuff to happen. I think that's morphing a little bit, because I think in the last 48 hours, there are 2 major businesses that have severed their ties with the NRA, largely, and they all said it was in response to customer feedback. Well, that had to be social, right? Just because of the time frame. So it's a powerful force, and businesses are watching and listening. So speaking of listening and businesses, my question is, so for those that follow you on social media, they might describe you as outspoken, perhaps?
What?
Bold, maybe? Has it hurt you from a business perspective?
No.
Ever?
No.
No bad stories, no cautionary tales, nothing?
No. I mean, maybe Catholic Social Services isn't calling, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know who isn't calling, but I'm fine with who is. It's interesting. I often feel like I don't deserve the life I have, because I don't know how it happened. I mean, Natasha will tell you, we were waiting tables together 25 years ago, and she probably looked at me like, tuck your shirt in. Who let you out? She was very, very stylish, and I was like, oh, God, I got sauce on my shirt. I sort of feel like, I'm a big believer in we can't ask for a seat at the table if we don't look around and see who's not there with us and invite them too. And so I sort of feel like when you get to a place and you recognize any amount of power that you have that could benefit anybody, like, listen, Clockwork's just a little company, with 60 people in Northeast Minneapolis trying to do good work and trying to get along. And I'll be honest with you, Sarah knows this, we had the worst year of our lives last year, and we are having the best year of our lives this year because we stick to our guns. We're having a great year this year. So we go through the same ups and downs as anybody else. We are not glorious all the time. I do not have happy people all the time. People quit sometimes. I am lucky. I am a lucky human being. I have a great kid and a great spouse. I have 0 complaints. And if I can do one thing, every day to help somebody else, I'm going to do it. Because I mean, there's no point in being alive if you can't help each other. So, and I guess that's my way of responding, because the things that I'm outspoken about, I am proud to be outspoken about. They are not, I am. And if people have a hard time with family equality or feminism or, being decent to humans, they can piss right off. Seriously.
Hey, Nancy. This is Missy. I work in social and influencer for a local agency, and I rather than a question, I want to expound on something you said earlier about diversity and diversity in tech and inviting people to the table. I think from a marketing and social media perspective, all of us have a responsibility to make sure that comes through in the images that we put out for our companies. So I will tell you, it happens almost at least once a week that I see a set of creative for somebody's social media feed, and it's all white people, and I'm like, where's the different colors of skin? Where's the age diversity? I'm sick of looking at PowerPoint decks with all 20-year-olds for big tech companies.
Yes! Snap it now, people. Snap it now.
I want to see people in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 40s, right? Like, we all have that responsibility. And it's not just social media. It's on your website. If it's all white people, it's on your advertising. I have literally emailed a company after seeing their website, and I was like, it was an OBGYN clinic. And I was like, do you seriously only have white people that come here? Because I don't see anyone else represented on your website. Or it was a TV commercial. And I was so mad because I know it's not true. And just because you live in like some podunk suburb of Minnesota and you never see anyone else, that doesn't mean that's the world we live in. So we have a big responsibility to change the images that we're putting out.
Truth.
And if you're using stock photos, usually it just means you need to make sure you get to page 4, 5, and 6 of the results. And even then, they're all smiling and happy and posed.
It's really not that important. I could probably talk loud enough for you
Yeah,
here.
that's true.
Yeah, we've already clarified that.
Yeah.
I love listening to you speak, by the way.
Thank you.
This is, yeah.
That's hilarious because I am just getting over the flu. This has been like a horseshit week, and I'm just getting over the flu, and the fact that I've said anything coherent or valuable is just like a freaking miracle.
There were a lot of things said,
Okay,
and
good.
I'm going to go way back to the beginning of the conversation. I'm going to start chronologically here.
Oh, God.
When we were talking about happy employees.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes along with what the last person just said as well, with social media, with the messages that are being put out. What I find very interesting, I've had great jobs in my life. I've had really bad jobs in my life. And I've noticed that there's a similar theme with me and my coworkers. When you work for a great company, you broadcast that because you like to share things you're proud of in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you work at places where you're not so happy, the social chatter is low.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this ties in not just to Social Media Breakfast and your theme, but also in trying to find more diversity in a workplace. When you do, I work in tech as well. I have for 16 years. It's not a very diverse place.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are able to bring in more diversity, you need to find ways for those people to tell their story as well to their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Bring your friends.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not happy, they're not going to share that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I really appreciate your stance on making sure your employees are happy.
Thanks.
I don't know if there's a question there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it.
I can't, it's just like any relationship, right? How many of you have partners or persons, others, something, dog? You can't make another person happy, right? They have to want to be happy, or they have to want to at least see some of the happy in their day. So I can't make clockworkers happy. They have to want to bring a contribution and receive the contributions of their colleagues. And I want to encourage that environment. So because I think if we're looking to our workplaces to make us happy, it's the same as if I look to my spouse to make me happy, I'm done, right? That person isn't going to make me happy. I have to find it here. And that's true of work too. So we have to be realistic about what our expectations of work. But if we are, and we actually care about each other, and it's not me just caring about them. I don't care about them. No, I'm just kidding. I love them. I tell people I love them at work every day, and I don't think it's off-putting anymore, but not anymore, right? But I don't think, you came from Best Buy. Do they tell each other they love each other at Best Buy? No. But I do. I say, I love you guys. It's true. I want not a loving energy, that sounds weird, but I want there to be some love in the room. We got to care about each other in order for us to be vulnerable enough to get shit right.
I know we're almost at time, but I want to have one last question if anybody wants to take that on. Oh, you put the mic away.
Oh.
I'll bring it up. Ugh. And then, Nancy, are you able to stick around for a couple minutes so if people want to come up and ask their questions?
What's the beer at Clockwork this week?
What's the beer? We now have 3 kegs, 3 of them. One has cold pressed coffee, but the other 2 are, oh, it doesn't? That was bullshit. But, you know, here's the sad part. I'm not really a beer drinker, so I don't know. What is the beer at Clockwork?
There's 2 IPAs and there's 1 EPA. I think it's the, what is Opperman's Brewery? Badger Hill.
Oh, Badger Hill. Yeah. Some good beer. Hit up Badger Hill. And Shakopee? Have you had any Badger Hill beer? Some good stuff. Yeah, stop on by, have a beer. Sign a waiver. Kidding. That's funny though. I mean, you must know that I hate that question because everybody's like, they have beer there. Yeah, okay. I mean, people don't drink it that often. I mean, when they do, it's like not.
I mean, you're wrong. We do.
No. That's funny. I don't drink beer, so they have Fresca. That's all I care about.
Say, Jen. Jen, one more question. Can you give any insights or suggestions for the gun control, shortly for the gun control and the kids and how their social skills are doing? Is there anything we're learning from that? Or
I mean, here's what's working with that. Telling the true stories about those young people is blowing the rest of us away, right? Like seeing those young people step up and be so articulate and so poised and so generous with their spirits, I think should move the rest of us to action. And I think, you know, while the hashtag is helpful and the activity online is helpful, it's seeing them take action in physical spaces, connect with people in physical spaces, and tell their truths. I have hope for the future. I really do. And I know I'm imagining we all do. And I think anybody who takes issue with those children or suggests that they are being paid or manipulated is straight up a horrible person, because that is the potential. That is our future right there. And it is bright. We will get past our bullshit soon. I believe it.
I'm going to add one actionable thing that I really think we can all do, whether it's this particular issue or any other kind of major events that happen, especially when we're representing brands or companies online, is leave that space open for the people who are telling the important stories. Most of the world doesn't care what big brand A or big brand B thinks about it. There's not the same story to tell. Mm-hmm. And so the people who can authentically tell it, give them the space to do it.
Mm-hmm. Totally true. Thank you.
I don't want to say the last thing. So Nancy, do you know any good knock-knock jokes?
No. No. But I'll say, stop behaving and use your force for good. We all have to do it.
Thank you so very much for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Can we get one more round of applause, please?
Yay! Yay!
Anything next month? Nothing next month? Okay.